Got it.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming on this Tuesday morning or whenever you are watching this on YouTube. My name is Bill Kane, and I have been assigned the envious task of explaining spirituality. And I'm going to take about 20 minutes to do this and then turn it over to my valued colleague, Michael Brusca, and I'll introduce him in a bit. But for now, I have to define spirituality is really an almost impossible task, because we are trying to do is explain in a lawyer-like fashion something that does not exist in the Black's Law Dictionary. And also, the most precious things in life cannot be measured. And spirituality and spiritual values are among those things that can't be measured. But I have some keywords, and they're keywords to highlight you whether you want to stay and hear us or not. But the first keyword is atavistic, and the second one is going to be Dr. Coley, and the third one is Justice Virginia Long and Carl Sagan. And then I'm going to be talking about the Mad Monk from Ohio. And if I can do that in 20 minutes, you'll be then treated to my colleague's presentation. The word atavistic, I like that word. It's you probably know what it means, but I use it to mean way back to the sources, to the cavemen, that we have atavistic instincts and atavistic things we learn. And as a matter of fact, in this day and age, people are looking at the way the so-called cavemen or Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon people, the way they ate. And they also had instincts like the fight or flight syndrome. That's something very basic. And they also had something called association or connection. That's where we humans follow our instincts to be in a herd or a clan or a tribe or an extended family. And so those three key words are eat, survive, and thrive. And they're the atavistic instincts that we had when people were sitting around an imaginary campfire. I'm trying to think of a New Yorker cartoon with a caption on it, where they looked up into the sky and said, where did all this come from? And where did we come from? And where are we going? So that's what the first nature of spiritual values is. It's the search for meaningfulness and hope and the good things in life, usually. And what my key here, I said Dr. Coley, because in 1959, I took a philosophy course from a very, very bright German professor, and his name was Dr. Coley. And about 20 times in a 55-minute hour, he would say, lo and behold, in a deep German accent. And I always liked that, because I wanted to say lo and behold. And that's what I hope I can say at the end of this presentation, that this is what we've given you, because all we can do is really touch the tips of something that is immeasurable and to ponder. Yeah, I also think that the shepherds had something on us, because when mankind had the ability to get herd animals, and the shepherds were out watching their flocks or their herds, they had a chance to lay back and look at the sky. And they're the ones who probably named the stars, the idle shepherds, in a spiritual experience of watching their herd. And they wrote things down and named things. So of all this, people looked also up, and they also said, well, somebody made us. So they created some concept of a divinity, otherwise known as AKA God. And that divinity, it started with the people sitting around the campfire outside the cave, and it grew into what we see now are magnificent cathedrals and wars and inquisitions and things that the good and wonderful and heroic things and the beautiful artistic things that religion has brought us. So this really tells us that the spiritual aspect is instinctive and inspiring. However, there was something that occurred after that, which was called the Enlightenment. And in the time of the Enlightenment, people said, wait a second, let's look at the way that we can measure certain things. And an apple fell from the tree, and Newton had a discussion about gravity, and they decided that the world was not flat. So from that point, we had a spiritual and religious spirituality and the non-religious spirituality. And I think that's where we are now. And that's kind of where I'm going, because if there are people watching this who are religious and observant and have this profound faith and belief, good, you're way ahead of the game, because you've got your chunk of spirituality that probably doesn't need definition. You have a comfort in talking to a higher power and feeling that this is just and kind, and you have looking at a salvation too. But there's other of us who either have had the religious upbringing and have wandered away, or found our own path, or have no path, or we or we need a humanistic and liberal and rational view of spirituality. So we need to say that both of these exist and they overlap. They're not in conflict. They are talking about the same principles and the same inspiring concept that I am beginning to explain to you now. And the other thing is, there is remember on public television, there was a man named Carl Sagan, and he used to end up knee deep in the surf, and beyond him and in the sky, he would wave to the cosmos and show us all the stars. And I would get a lump in my throat and tears in my eyes, and looking at the magnificence and the infinity of it all. And Carl Sagan had stirred in me a spiritual feeling, a feeling that there was much more than two human beings, myself watching Channel 13 and Carl Sagan stirring these feelings in me. The zinger is, and it really is a zinger, is that Carl Sagan passed away, bless his soul, or bless his spirit, and he left a book, and they call it published posthumously. In the very first page of that book, Carl Sagan emphasizes, if I don't see it, this is his quote, if I don't see it under a microscope, it doesn't exist. So he was scoffing at the notion of spirituality and spiritual feelings, yet he was the one who was stirring and inciting these feelings in me. So there's a conflict right there of somebody who's denying the product of his inspiration. And that's okay too. Is the expression, do I contradict myself? Therefore I contradict myself. So the other aspect I wanted to talk about, we know that spiritual things are the goodness and the hope and the meaningful quest and the search for joy and happiness and prosperity and all the good things. Because when I read a newspaper article or see something that talks about somebody who does something bad or unacceptable, one of the first things that occurs to me is, what was this person's motivation? Where did that, and I know that the prosecutor probably has a motivation, but he's not telling us because they can't do that on YouTube. So we have to stuff this feeling about motivation and just wonder about people's minds and thoughts and instincts. And we're chucking that, and we're looking at the lo and behold of spirituality being a good, positive thing. And if we have a good, positive thing like that, is it something we can trigger? Is it something we can savor? Is it something we can save? Or is it something that we enjoy accidentally? Or do we have a sensitivity within ourselves to be able to identify, aha, this is a spiritual experience and I ought to cherish it. And maybe I'll seek more. So is there such a thing as our own instincts being refined and redefined so that we can churn and enjoy spiritual experience more so than not? And of course, no one has a monopoly on this, but it's certainly my 20 minutes with you this morning is probably to just redefine something that is not readily touchable, and also to say that this is something that we seek. You know, in the medical journals, they once sneaked in the word spiritual experience or spiritual awakening or something like that. And somebody comes back and they changed it. Oh no, a belief in a transcendental value. And so the transcendental values of Thomas Aquinas and Ralph Waldo Emerson are goodness, truth, and beauty. And if we can almost personify those concepts, we've got an idea of spirituality. So then I want to talk about for a moment, I don't know if you've heard of Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton was a Trappist monk, and Trappist monks are the kind of clergy people who take several vows of obedience, poverty, chastity, and they also take a vow of silence, except for their chanting. Well, back in 1993, there is a friend of mine, Steve Barrett, who said, I can't take this guy to lunch. They've asked me from Ohio to take him to lunch, and I can't. Can you do it? And we had a place called Bennigan's quite near the Law Center in New Brunswick. Lo and behold, I ended up across the table from a person named Thomas. Thomas was a sole practitioner in the Cleveland area, and he had 10 kids. And he also, for one reason or another, got into his trust account. Ohio may be the only other state like New Jersey where defalcation from the trust account warrants disbarment, and disbarment is forever. And we know about In Ray Wilson. And for those of you who have a sharp pencil handy, it's 81 New Jersey 451, a 1979 case that says that if you go into your trust account, you're going to lose your license forever and ever and ever. And the last line in that opinion at 81 New Jersey 451, it says, rarely, if ever, will any mitigating factors apply. So Thomas was prosecuted and sentenced to 10 years in Ohio Penitentiary. He was not a young man. And before he got into the penitentiary, he got into some form of recovery and also hooked up with Thomas Merton's Trappist monks in Bardstown, Kentucky, in a town called Gethsemane. This is much more than 100 years old, this Trappist monastery, where they have monks working in silence and obedience all day, every day, 24/7. And that's what Thomas joined. He took the name Brother Thomas More for obvious reasons. And he joined them before he finished his 10-year sentence. And in those days, we used to do a third of our time in state prison. So after 3 years and 3 months, because he was a good inmate, he was released from Ohio Penitentiary and went directly to Thomas Merton's Trappist monastery. There, he was basking in his recovery in solitude and silence, and he decided to reach out a bit. And so he got a relaxation of his vow of silence and ended up at lunch with me in Bennigan's. And the purpose of his lunch was he wanted to know if there was somebody he could call to take some courses at Rutgers University, because he had no money and he had no access to this. So I said, sure, here's some phone numbers. Be happy to support you. And he did. He got a scholarship to Rutgers to participate in their counseling and alcohol studies and other studies. And he did that. And that was in 1993. So I didn't hear from him until 1994 in November, when I got a letter in the mail that had a plane ticket in it. And this plane ticket was to Bardstown, Kentucky, eventually, via Louisville. And they were inviting me to spend time in this monastery in solitude and silence as my reward for giving him the phone number to get a scholarship. Well, you talk about out of proportion rewards. And I said, no, I can't do it. It's too close to the holidays and so on. And I have this new program that we're starting in lawyers called the New Jersey Lawyers Assistance Program. And I only have one person. He said, just get on the plane. I said, but, you said, just get on the plane. So I got on the plane and that spent 16 days, then spent 16 days in solitude and silence in an old brick monastery. It's vast, it's very big, with lots of farmland surrounding it. And as a matter of fact, Abraham Lincoln's first teacher and only teacher, I think, is buried on those grounds of the Gethsemane Monastery in Kentucky. And I was joining other attorneys who were also participating in this visit. And some of them were observant, almost evangelistic, pious people. Some people had no concept of any higher power whatsoever. And there was a mixture of other heritages. There were about 12 of us. And we were told that we could not speak to each other and that we just had to take food and go to meditation and listen to chanting. And that was for 16 days. Now, just telling you about this, it was such a profound experience. It was an accidental forced visit to this monastery, not knowing what to expect. But as I'm talking to you about, I have a weak feeling in my stomach and a lump in my throat, because that experience of not talking to anyone and only having my own thoughts and being encouraged to be in a positive spiritual place without any commitment to any higher power or divinity or God, this was probably one of the highest experiences of my life. And just telling you about it is not to brag that I had this experience, certainly, but to share with you that there is such a thing. So I thought I knew about meditation before. I had a class of drunk drivers that I once encouraged to do guided imagery and meditation, and they loved it. So I had experience in the past with mindfulness and meditation, but this crash course was something that I had not expected. And that's where I got the impression, well, that's where I came to the conclusion that there's no way I'm going to be able to explain spiritualism and spirituality to a group seeking wellness and well-being in the profession. Now, that's another thing. This is the subtitle is wellness and well-being in the profession is a movement now. There's a Supreme Court committee about wellness in the profession. And we even are distinctive in our definitions of wellness, which means health and nutrition and exercise and all the things that I should be paying more attention to, and well-being, which is a higher feeling of emotional maturity and a positive emotional trip that includes a spiritual growth and spiritual attention and savoring, cherishing, and saving those spiritual experiences. Now, you've all had them, and I know that the best stories are the ones that you could tell me, because in doing something like this, I learn more than I give. And what I'm learning now is that I am a very feeble messenger for the concept of spirituality and spiritualism. What I've tried to do is make a distinction between the usual, the everyday use of the word spiritual or spirituality, which means religiosity, and say that the people who are looking at it now in this 21st century, whether they're right or wrong, or whether they're more accurate or less accurate, they are the folks who would be able to define it for you. And therefore, we have come together on this Tuesday morning to pause for a moment, to wait, to think of the higher values and the higher the experiences that we've had, the things that are joyful to us, that thrill us, that inspire us, the things that keep us going, and also the everyday tasks that we have and that we do, whether it's by our choice or because we're in the legal profession, which is a helping profession. Now, that's one of the obstacles we have to asking for help or asking for therapy or asking for reflection on where we are. When you're in the pedestal profession of the law, we are the helpers. And sometimes we could get caught up in the fact that the helpers don't need help because the helpees are the people that we are clients. So we're in that position. However, after 28 years in the lawyer's assistance program, I have come to other conclusion. And that is, first, we attorneys, we do have some barriers and to asking for help. And they may include pride and fear and concern for the practice and just distraction about the everyday life of things. And they are barriers to getting help. But when we put ourselves in the position of looking for help or receiving help or even suggestions, we attorneys are superb. And that's where I really am pleased to have been an attorney for a long time. And that is because we attorneys can read the directions on the box. When you explain something to us in words, we are able to summarize, to isolate the issues, to brief a case, to have alternative arguments, and we are able to reason these things. And that is a blessing and a benefit that most of us have. And we also call this kind of breakthrough a breakthrough, or we can call it an aha or eureka or some type of awakening that would make us newly sensitive to the experience of having spiritual growth. And as Dr. Coley would say, lo and behold, that is what I have to deliver to you about spirituality today, to say that the most precious things in life cannot be measured, and among them are our spiritual growth. Now, at this point, I'm going to ask my colleague to prepare to hear about himself, because I have a summary of his bio, a very brief one that we've digested it 5 times in Lawyer's Assistant. And Michael Brusca is an attorney, and he has, since 2009, Michael has devoted his practice to representing vulnerable people and their families in abuse, neglect, and death caused in nursing homes, rehabs, assisted living facilities, and hospitals. Forgive me for reading this. He is one of a select folks in New Jersey to truly concentrate their practice and their knowledge on this important topic by regularly lecturing around the country and teaching other lawyers to be aware of or participate in his specialty. And rather than trying to explain his esteemed accomplishments, I'm going to ask him to take over at this point. And I give you Michael Brusca. Good morning on Tuesday. Michael, it is yours.
Thanks, Bill. Yes, Bill indicated, my name is Mike Brusca. I've been practicing in nursing home neglect and abuse cases. I've been doing it for about 15 years. I was in the service before that, and then I had been at a large law firm for a brief period of time before that. It's kind of a diverse background. I'm also a husband. I've been with my wife for 20 years, and I have 2 kids, 2 teenagers that are great joy in my life. And I will tell you this too, the overarching theme of my talk is spirituality for the unspiritual. I am not a spiritually gifted person. And I can also tell you that the only reason that I ever went, I won't even say looking for these ideas. The only reason I ever adopted any of these ideas is because I was really forced to. I mean, I'm a member in recovery for over half my life. So that's the only reason why I ever adopted these principles. And generally what I find, and I don't know what anyone else's experiences, is that that's usually when people go looking for spiritual principles. I mean, I don't know too many people who are in a great mood right now, taking a walk outside with no stress in their life, to think, you know what, I'm going to go try prayer and meditation. I mean, I don't see that happening too often, if ever. Generally speaking, in my experience, the idea of spiritual principles or spiritual tools or whatever you want to call them, they're still at the last house on the block. You know what I'm saying? And even for me, I've been doing this a long time. It is still unnatural to me in a lot of ways. A lot of things are rote. I've built them into my life, and at the end of the day, I do them because I have to do them. But because of this, I have a business and a marriage, and I show up for my kids, and I have a really nice life as a direct result of it. So, if you're like me, right, there's great hope there. That's my idea, because to my experience, perfect people give no hope. I mean, like I said, you might have read like Eckhart Tolle or some of these other kind of modern day philosophers on the subject. I don't know anybody that goes looking for those things unless they have to, really. So I don't think I'm any different than a lot of other people, and I don't claim to be gifted at it or anything like that. But this is what I've learned about these ideas, and I have some tools that I build into my life because I'm a really practical person. I'll discuss later, but it doesn't matter whether I believe in it or I don't believe in it. It doesn't matter if I want to do it or I don't want to do it. It doesn't matter if I'm comfortable with it or I'm uncomfortable with it. It just matters if I do it. So, I'll go through a couple tools, and really there's a lot of them that are built into my life. I don't know that I'm going to get to all of them, but I'll just talk about some of the highlights. But at the end of the day, I was generally uncomfortable with it at first, and oftentimes today I'm still uncomfortable with it, but it works. There was times where I said to myself, this is not going to work at all. This is garbage. But I did it, and I got the benefits from it. So in my experience, it doesn't matter. Whatever I believe about it is irrelevant. It just matters if I do it. To me, it's like, my wife and I go out. One of the great things about your kids getting older is you can pawn off your chores on them. So, my two kids, one of their jobs is they got to clean the kitchen after dinner. They got to do the dishes, wipe the counters down. At the end of the day, if I go out and I come back, I don't care if they want to do the dishes or they don't want to do the dishes. I don't care if they feel good about doing the dishes or don't feel good about doing the dishes. I don't care if they think it's the valuable thing to spend their time on or not. At the end of the day, I just come home. I just want to see the dishes done. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, most of the time, that is the case. And I find that these ideas, spiritual tools, are the same. Whatever my belief in it is irrelevant. It's just if I do it, I get the benefit, right? I will also say this: it's difficult because I find that the legal landscape is not a very spiritual landscape. Ultimately, I do litigation, and it really just can bring out the worst in people. It's not easy. It's not easy. Clients can be difficult. Opposing counsel can be difficult. Generally speaking, litigation there's a winner and there's a loser. Now, Bill and I were talking about this before we started, but there's the egos involved too. This is shocking, right? Some lawyers have ego problems. That's a true statement. If you haven't come across that, that is a true statement. So you kind of put all this together and then, throw in a big pile of money, and it's like, whoa, what could go wrong, right? So I find at times it can be very difficult, and I have to constantly use these tools over and over and over again. And really, I'll explain. To my mind, there's a reason for this, right? It's not. There's an end result that I want to get. So, like Bill is kind of wrestling with this idea of what is spirituality. Look, I don't really have a good definition of it. It's difficult, right? It's like defining humility, or we're lawyers, like even the Supreme Court, like defining pornography. It's just like, well, I'm not sure, but that's porn, right? And I think spirituality is a lot of the same way. It's very difficult to tack down what exactly it is. And so for me, what was important early on when I started doing this stuff was, what is it not? What is it not? Now, it is not religion. I'm not a religious person. Now, I have prejudices towards religion that I had to get over, right? They can coexist and a lot of ideas come from that universe in my experience, but they are two different things in my opinion. I grew up going to parochial school. I had gone to religious high school as well. Not really until towards the end of my education do I recall anyone presenting spiritual tools for me as, or spiritual ideas to me as practical tools. There were things to memorize, there were things to say, there were rituals to perform, but it was never laid out to me in a way where it made sense for me to do something because I would get a benefit out of it, right? Look, and that's just how I remember it. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. That's the way I recall it. So for me, spirituality is not religion, right? And that was important for me to make that distinction. And then, look, I'm a Northeasterner. When I first heard spirituality, I was like, no, that sounds a little West Coast to me, like dolphins, avocados, stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's like yoga pants type things and crystals. I really wasn't into it in that respect. And so I had to get beyond these prejudices I had towards these ideas. And so understanding what it wasn't was really important before I could start to talk about, well, what is it? What is it? And this is, I don't even want to call it a definition in a way. This is the best understanding I have of spirituality today. They are very practical tools that allow me to have a clear perspective on my life. And then a very important byproduct of that is I feel pretty good most of the time. And that goes beyond any circumstances in my life in any moment, that I can have a clear perspective and feel pretty good most of the time. And I have to say that, I mean, I turned 50 this year, so I have some life experience. I lived in like different countries. I have a lot of work experience. In my experience, most people don't feel pretty good most of the time. So the fact that I can achieve that, even though I'm not good at this stuff, is remarkable. And I get the result of it. And that, to me, is worth the price of admission, right? Additionally, with a clear perspective and feeling pretty good most of the time, I'm a more effective person. I'm a more effective husband. I'm a more effective father. I'm a more effective attorney. And, the one thing I've learned in life is whatever kind of this definitely sounds West Coast vibe I'm putting out there, right? It has people react to it, right? And if I have a positive mindset, if I feel pretty good most of the time, then that's really what I'm giving off, which impacts other people, right? I have people that work with me, and it's important that I don't drag them down, because that's what I find happens on the back end of that. If I'm not in a good space and I'm not using my tools really, then I have the capacity to, drag someone else down in the mud with me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that today. So I am mature enough to understand that my behaviors and feelings is not limited to me, right? I don't want to be a manure spreader, basically, when I go into the office or I go into my home or I go into a volunteer organization, right? So these principles are very helpful, because having that clear perspective and feeling pretty good most of the time is extremely helpful to those around me. Okay. So I am a practical person. And so I like talking about practical things I can do to get me to this place where I feel pretty good most of the time. Now, look, some of these are from recovery programs. A lot of them are from different religions. I don't discriminate in this way. I will pick and choose things. A lot of them are universal to religions. So sometimes I just take what I like and then I disregard the other stuff I don't like. And it's changing all the time. Like I kind of add things, I discard things I don't need any longer. But a lot of these tools are pretty universal. So if you're interested in this topic, or you've read books on it, you probably come across some of these. I don't think they're I certainly didn't come up with them. I'll put it that way. So The first one, this one I really like because this actually is from Roman Stoicism, which I really like the Roman Stoics. If there was a religion that I could adhere to, that's pretty much that one, even though it wasn't really a religion. And I really like these guys. I thought they had a lot of wisdom, and uh, they were very good at conveying these ideas. And in my experience, a lot of people, if they think about this long enough, you kind of get to these ideas. Um, the one thing I did like about the Romans Stoics was um, they had an idea like I do about the God, whatever that is. I don't know. The way they looked at it was your human brain cannot comprehend whatever is the creative intelligence. So don't even really think about it. And I like that idea. I would call myself like a deist, I guess. I mean, I believe there's something else that I don't understand. To me, that's like explaining baseball to your pet cat. It's like you can say to your cat, listen, they're going to throw this ball and this guy's going to swing a stick and try to hit and run on those white squares, and the cat's like, whatever, buddy. I mean, to me, like the idea that I'm going to comprehend the creator universe is kind of ridiculous. So I don't even think about that stuff anymore. It's not relevant to me. And I don't have those discussions because I don't know that any human is going to have the capacity to explain that to me in a way that makes sense. And the Roman Stoics were like that too, right? In fact, if you go to the Pantheon in Rome, which is a magnificent building, it's the oldest functioning church in the world, but it wasn't built as a church in the Catholic sense. It was built by a Stoic, and if you go there, it's a huge concrete dome. I mean, it's a miracle they built this thing, right? Considering they had no complex math because they know zero, they built this giant concrete dome, and at the top there's a hole called the oculus, right? So you can stand anywhere on the floor of the Pantheon any day of the year, and you will never see the sun directly. And the idea was that you can't know the God, like you'll just see evidence of this. He's a human. You can't know the source of it, right? You can just see the evidence of it. And I love this idea, right? And I kind of, that makes the most sense to me. And so I'm a big fan of these guys. And well, now I guess guys and gals, but I mean, at the end of the day, I really enjoy what they have to say. And so this first one is from the Roman Stoics, and this one is like, I'm gonna I'm gonna sanitize it because I will tell you this. In my house, I use a different word, and my kids would use a different word, but I don't know this audience well enough, and so don't be a jerk, okay? Don't be a jerk, especially to jerks, right? Which is difficult, right? Don't be a jerk, but especially to other jerks. This is what I found. I have a natural desire at times to lash out at people that are, in my opinion, misbehaving, right? I don't think that's, I think it's normal, right? I think it's very, very normal. And to me, what I've learned is that my behavior only impacts me primarily, right? So if I'm a jerk, not only do I have the capacity to hurt another person, but I really have the capacity to hurt myself, right? Because I'm not a psychopath. I'm not a sociopath. Like, I don't feel good when I behave out of bounds. So it's really important for me to maintain that discipline because it's difficult. Look, if you do litigation, or even if you don't do litigation, you're a lawyer. I can assure you, you come across these people sometimes like there is something wrong with them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that problem did not start when they were a 1L in law school. Like, these people, there is something broken in there. They are like naturally combative. It's like they have oppositional defiance disorder. Like, and you have to deal with these people, right? I mean, if you have opposing counsel who's one of these folks, it's just like, oh my God, I just put my head down. I'm like, all right, gonna have to use all my tools with this guy or gal, right? And the reaction, my initial reaction is, I should go over there and do violence to him. Like, sometimes violence is the answer, I think. No, I got to do better, right? I got to draw from this and remind myself, don't be a jerk, especially to jerks, right? Because it only harms me. And in this respect, I have to keep the big picture, right? At the end of the day, what do I really want? Is I just want peace of mind. I just want to feel pretty good most of the time. And I have to keep that objective in mind all the time because I get diverted left and right, left and right. And I just have to keep myself on track and say, what I really want is peace of mind. And is this going to get it for me? And being a jerk is not going to get it for me. Even if the guy's a complete mental defect, like it's still not going to help me, right? I might feel better in a moment, but I'm like, no, I got to deal with that. And I don't want to deal with it, right? So it's better for me just to, keep my mouth shut or do the best I can. I actually had a deposition with this one guy, and I had someone on the deposition with me, another attorney. And afterwards, he wanted to talk about it. He's like, that's like a master class on how to deal with a jerk. And I was like, well, I just have a lot of experience. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've been doing this a long time. And so kind of know how to handle myself in those situations. But just not being a jerk, especially to other jerks, is really helppful. And so that's an important spiritual tool. I know it sounds really basic, but a lot of these are basic, and I have to constantly remind myself and bring myself back to these basic ideas because I will forget them in like 15 minutes. Okay, so along a similar line is I try to forgive aggressively, right? Now, the first time this was presented to me, I was pretty skeptical on this, and I wasn't really sure what is the resistance. Like, why would I resist forgiveness? And I really came down to there's two main ideas that really were a barrier to this. And number one was I felt like if I forgave someone, I was condoning their conduct, right? That if I say, you know what, I forgive you, that I was saying what you did was okay, right? That was the first barrier. And the second barrier was if I forgive someone, I feel like I'm giving something up, right? Like I'm giving away something to someone else. And I've come to realize that both those principles are wrong, right? Now, look, I get harmed by clients, by opposing counsel all the time. I forgive aggressively. Number one, I am not giving anything up. All I'm giving up when I forgive someone are bad feelings like anger or resentment. Like these are strong feelings that are really unpleasant. And the reality is like how I feel is a really narrow pedestal. It has room for one thing at a time. So if I got resentment and anger on that pedestal, that's what's up there. And I got to tell you, like those aren't nice feelings. Those are the kind of feelings that will leave me at 2 a.m, like plotting someone's death. And I'm like, no, like I don't want to be doing that at 2 a.m. Then I got to go downstairs and watch Netflix for 2 hours so I can get back to sleep. Like I don't want to do that, right? So what I would prefer to do is to have peace of mind and keep that higher goal in mind, right? And so if I forgive someone, then the only thing I'm giving up is bad feelings, right? And once I came to that conclusion, I was like, yeah, why am I holding on to bad feelings? Like that's foolish. Like it's just impacting me, right? And so when I have an intense interaction with it's usually another attorney, I will literally say out loud, I forgive that person. In fact, not only forgive that person, I forgive everyone who has harmed me from the day I was born to the current moment. And I will tell you, when I say that, I actually feel kind of lighter. I feel lighter just by saying it, right? So that was really important. And it certainly doesn't condone the conduct because I'm not forgiving them for them. I'm forgiving them for me. You've probably seen this where there'll be like a terrible murder and the parent of the murdered person comes into court and says, I forgive you. And everyone's like, oh, it's so magnanimous. I'm like, no, it's not. They're doing what they need to do in order to move on and function. It got nothing to do with the defendant or the murderer. It's them that they're focused on, right? They have that ability, or they understand the higher thing floating around out there, which is peace of mind, and they know what it takes to get it. So when I got over those two barriers, then I forgive left and right. I forgive left and right. In fact, when I'm angry at somebody, I will actually ask the universe to give them happiness and peace of mind. And it helps me. It helps me. Even at the worst actors in my life, I will say to my universe, like, hey, give that person happiness and peace of mind. Maybe it won't be such a jerk. So I found that that's a very useful tool, and for me at least. Okay, so the next one is to tell the truth, right? Tell the truth, not only about myself, but or not only, as I'm obligated to as a lawyer, but about myself. Now, look, as a lawyer, to me, that's like cash register honesty. Like, it's important, right? I mean, I've actually been against other opposing counsel who don't tell the truth, and that troubles me because we're not playing by the same rules now. Like, I'm not gonna do that, right? I have like I be honest in that respect, but also to be honest with others and myself. So you may have had this happen where someone is like, "Oh, how are you?" And then it's almost like a rhetorical question, or it's like a call for response. "Oh, fine. How are you?" The reality is, like, I might not be fine, and I do have people in my life that are really important that I will tell them the truth about what's going on about it. I find that oftentimes, like, this is a natural human thing. Okay, humans communicate. It's very important, and so it's important for me to use this tool because I get a resistance sometimes doing this, telling people how I feel about things, to telling them about my, what's going on inside. Uh, and sometimes I have a natural resistance to that, and I have to put that aside, and it's really important. And I have people really close to me in my life. Like, I have very close friends. I have siblings that I'm close with. I have a wife that I've been with for a long time that I will talk to about these things. And that is very, very important. I think sometimes people feel resistance. They don't want others to know either they're struggling or whatever it happens to be, because then they'll be looked at differently or judged or whatever. And that has never been the case. In fact, I have found that discussing my imperfections with people is exactly how you bridge a friendship to another person. I went to high school with this guy. He was smart guy, really smart guy, good looking guy, good athlete. And then he did all the stuff he was supposed to do while I was, doing keg stands in the parking lot after the football game I played. He was like, studying and working hard and doing all this stuff. And then so he goes off to college, he gets great grades in college. And then he goes on to law school, and then he gets a job at a prestigious law firm, and then he committed suicide. And people are like, how would that happen? How does that happen? And I say, I know how that happens, right? He didn't have a proper perspective on his life, or a clear perspective on his life, right? And I understand how you can be in that position and understand those things about yourself that are not true necessarily, and clearly didn't talk to anybody about it, right? Um, Another thing that's really important to me, and Bill touched on this, is like, all right, I'm going to say these words, but I don't want you to click off, okay? Like prayer and meditation. I know you hear prayer, you're like, I'm not interested in that. I get it. I get it. Just like hear me out on this, okay? Let me plead my case. Well, number one, I'll start with meditation because that's easier. Look, there's a million ways to meditate. To me, when I first heard meditation, I thought Eastern meditation, like sit quietly, try to clear your mind. I was when I was stationed in Japan for a couple of years, and I remember talking to a Buddhist monk in a Buddhist temple, and he showed me the room where they do their meditation. They got these like little cubicles with a little cushion on each one of them, and then they sit there on Friday nights and do their Zen Buddhist meditation. So he asked me, he's like, "You know Zen Buddhist meditation?" And I was like, "Well, I've read about it." And he's like, "Think nothing, very difficult." And I was like, "Well, bro, you're a Buddhist monk, so the chance of me like think nothing is pretty low, right? I don't. That's not what I go for. To me, I like meditation. Like, here's a Roman Stoic, Marcus Aurelius, right? So this guy was probably the best emperor of Rome. I don't know. They didn't rank these fellas, but I mean, in my opinion, this guy was really the bee's knees. And he wrote a book called Meditations. And when you open it, it's not a blank book, right? He wrote down important things and then thought about them. Like, to meditate is to focus my attention on one thing, right? There is a horrible phrase, maybe you heard it, multitasking. Like, this is not a human thing, right? Either I can do one thing well or two things poorly. That's the way I look at it. And meditation helps me learn the skill. It also keeps me in the present moment. And I want to tell you this, and this is, I got this from a psychologist, so I'm not making this stuff up. To be present in the moment is not natural in many ways. Like, our brains are designed to rehash old things and learn lessons, and to look forward and project out. Like, that's what separates us from animals, right? We have this ability to do these things. So evolutionary, it's a great leap, but man, it can make me miserable, right? There's a great phrase. I don't know who said this, probably Keats or some poet, but you've never seen a wild thing sorry for itself. And that's true, right? I've never seen like a deer almost get hit by a car and then a year later it's like, oh, I'm such an idiot, but that's what I have the capacity to do that, right? To go back again and again and again, which is a waste of resources. Once I've amended something from the past, to think about it any further is a waste of resources unless it's going to be immediately helpful. So meditation is this tool that allows me to stay present in the moment. And the Buddhists understood this, right? They understood what the human brain does. And so there's like, well, here's some tools you can use. Now, like I said, to me, meditation is to think on something, to, close out distractions and focus on one thing at a time. And so to me, that's really important because the reality is if I'm in the present moment, unless there's a dog chasing me or someone's pointing a gun at me, there's probably nothing to worry about. But that does not stop my brain. I can be sitting in a temperature controlled room that is completely safe and out of my mind. Do you know what I'm saying? It makes no sense rationally. And really, when I look back on it, I mean, I think about the time I spent disturbed in my life, which being a lawyer is not insignificant amount of time. And I think about, well, how much of that time was there because there was a direct threat in front of me? And it's like 2%, which means 98% of it was make believe fantasy in my brain, just going on and on and on, right? And so meditation helps me to decrease that significantly. And so some ways I've done it is, especially with tasks I hate, like doing the dishes. It's like focus on doing the dishes, right? Focus on doing a good job with the dishes and put all else aside, especially menial tasks. It can be very helpful. Like if I have to draft a complaint, it's a complicated document. It's going to take my full attention. I'll do them on Saturday because no one's calling me. No one's coming in my office with some issue. I can focus on one thing at a time. Like that's meditation. And so I find that's extremely helpful to me. Now, prayer, on the other hand, is like a little trickier because, people, when I heard that, I heard like our Father or whatever. I was like, I'm not interested in that at all, right? So this is kind of the way I look at prayer. Prayer is like anytime I'm just talking out loud by myself, that's a form of prayer. So look, I got kids, and if you got kids, you probably experience this too, where your kids are like, they go to school and they've been there all day and they come home and you're like, how was school? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. Like, what do you mean nothing? You've been in school for 6 hours. Like something must have happened that you can recall in the present moment, right? What I didn't want was my kid to get down on his knees and start rattling off on our Father. Like I wasn't interested in that either. Like I really want to know, like what's going on with your day. So the way I do it is, look, I have things I say to my God in the morning and at night, but most importantly is I get in my car and I turn the radio off and I practice conversations out loud. Like I practice presentations I got to give out loud. Like someone's sitting there with me, or I'll be like, you know what, I got to talk to this person today. I'm dreading this call because they're such a jerk, right? Just help me do my best. And that stuff works. Like I just went on a retreat this summer, and it was a Christian retreat, and the form of prayer that this guy running the retreat, that's what he advocated for. The same thing. He's like, I'm not, this other stuff's not, and he's like, there's a resistance to it, right? I want to put the radio on. I want to listen to a podcast or whatever. And he's like, just start doing it. Do it for 3 minutes and see what happens, And that's been my experience. I get a tremendous benefit from it. So to me, when I hear prayer, I know all that baggage I carried into initially, I don't have that stuff anymore. I look at it a different way. I'm running out of time. I just want to talk about this last one because this one is important and it incorporates meditation, but this one is exercise. Look, I run on the weekend, and people hear that, I'll run like a half marathon, and people are like, "Oh, you're a runner." I'm like, no, I'm not a runner. I run. Like I don't like running, and running is hard, and I'm not interested in doing it. If I could get the same result by sitting on the couch playing video games with my 16-year-old and eating donuts, like I would do that. Okay, but I'm mature enough to know that is not the fast track to what I'm looking to achieve here. So exercise really accomplishes multiple things for me. Number one, in the moment, right? It does release chemicals in your brain. I don't get a runner's high like people talk about, but I do feel better. And I think a lot of that is exercise is just a way to get out energy, and emotions are just energy. Like to emote is to give off, right? And emotions, it's just this energy, and I got to get it out. Whether it be like if you even see like people jump with joy, right? It's energy. Or people that are scared shake, right? It's just energy, and I have to like get it out, and this helps me to get out that energy, right? Especially if I have intense emotions, like I got to get that energy out, because I've seen what happens when you don't do that, right? It leads to things like depression. You know what I'm saying? Like and I don't want that, right? So in my experience, this is very helpful in this. Now, one of the reasons why I like running is it's like rhythmic breathing, right? 2 steps breathe in, 2 steps breathe out, 2 steps breathe in, 2 steps breathe out. And that's meditative, right? I'll listen to music and just go and just go. And like I said, I never want to do it. It's not like I wake up Saturday morning like, oh man, I can't wait to hit the towpath. I mean, I know people like that. I am not that person, okay? Like I said, I do this because I have to do it, and because I know as a consequence of it, I will feel better. And it doesn't disappoint. So I've done like other types of exercise like yoga. Look, I'm 50, so I only run straight. I don't go one direction and I turn around and come back the other direction. I don't jump. I don't go side to side. I don't want any injuries, right? I want to be able to do this for as long as I can. And so I monitor it in that respect. But I found that others were helpful. Like I've been doing yoga for a while, for probably a better part of like 20 years. Not off and on, I do it. But even something as simple as like going for a brisk walk, which can be extremely helpful, because I've done that too. I've done that too. And that activity of getting out and moving my limbs, right, has is benefits everyone. It's an enormous benefit. So I can't explain enough. I just want to close on this. Like, there's a lot of stuff with this spirituality. It's really hard to nail down. Whatever. I mean, there's studies on this. You know, I found a recent study that was like, here's the title of it: is Using Spiritual Connections to Cope with Stress and Anxiety During COVID-19 Pandemic. Like, that's science. That's a published study. Okay. This is not the thing of like gurus or priests or whatever. I mean, it is like a practical human thing. And I find that when I do these practical human things, I really get good results from it. And like I said, even though I still have resistance to doing these things, I do them because it really is the easier, softer way for me, what is a much better life experience. And so, yeah. So if you're like me and none of that stuff, you resist and all that stuff too. Oh, there's great hope for you as well. So thank you.
Michael, one of the best things I've ever done is turning the presentation over to you. Your presentation was marvelous, and it's something I could not have done. So on behalf of the Lawyers Assistance Program, we want to thank you all, every one of you, for participating and joining us in this wellness webinar. And Mike, I especially want to thank you, because you have really explained spiritualism and spiritual awakening in a way that I could not have. Thanks again. And thank you all for being here. It's so good to spend a part of this week. I think this was a precious amount of time. Take care, everybody. Enjoy. Be well.